Hey, it's Jordan. Delighted to be joined by Larry Cohen. He's the board chairman for Our Revolution and was also a longtime former president of the Communications Workers of America. And Larry, I wanted to talk to you because in the endless just maze of Trump's lunacy, democracy at threat, the pandemic, the media, surprisingly, has not digged in too much into what Biden will actually do as president.
Right.
And I think one of the things that is looming that I'm seeing some signals that might return is the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which Biden, along with President Obama, championed, that Biden, as recently as the primary, was kind of hemming and hawing. He didn't strongly come out against it. Kind of gave off the impression, maybe we'll just change a few sentences and call it new. And I know you, for a long time, have been a fierce advocate of actually fair trade. So I wanted to talk to you because he's making some appointments now of folks that were previously pro-TPP. And a lot of people don't realize that once he gets in, if he pushes TPP, this could be, the final nail in the coffin of organized labor. What are your expectations as far as him reviving TPP?
Yeah, let me just say, I think it's also the coffin of Democrats winning elections at every level, from local government to federal, in industrial America. That the one place where Trump began to deliver, but stupidly from his point of view, I'm happy that he didn't follow up, was on trade. And why did Trump get support from the AFL-CIO, from Lori Wallach, who I consider the foremost trade expert in the country, for the USMCA, the renegotiated North American Free Trade Agreement that now is law? It's because his trade rep, Robert Lighthizer, was light years ahead of any former trade rep and got rid of the most obnoxious part of recent trade deals. Every trade deal since Clinton, including Bush and Obama, investor-state dispute settlement. Lighthizer got it out. That was our number one demand as I helped lead the fight against the TPP.
Can you explain for a
Sure.
dummy what that means?
Yeah, it's not a dummy. I should have explained it. The dumb part is me not explaining it to begin with. Investor-state dispute settlement means that if a nation passes legislation that harms the future, not even current, profits of corporations that invest there, that's why the word is investor-state, not state-state, but investor-state, that nation can be sued in a private tribunal, an arbitration, where the arbitrator is from the corporate legal world, the international corporate legal world. There's a body of these arbitrators. That's where they all come from there. And they can then be sued for the future profits that are lost. So what does that mean? General Motors, actually one of the better companies in terms of labor relations, but nonetheless exporting jobs to Mexico, for example, and elsewhere, that with investor-state dispute settlement, so prior to USMCA, when they put a plant in Mexico, which includes last year, and if Mexico then passes fair trade, in this case environmental regulation, about the air and other pollution of that plant, General Motors can sue and will win in arbitration. Major, whatever they would have lost in profits from that new law, the nation of Mexico must pay General Motors. So the result of that, Jordan, is that across Latin America, from Mexico south, investor-state dispute settlement as a provision of every trade deal that basically encompassed not only Mexico, but Central America, CAFTA, every trade deal. That prevented even left of center governments from doing anything to jeopardize those future profits. It's obscene, it's true. And the Democrats, including Biden, now not all Democrats, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Jeff Merkley in the Senate, the majority of the House caucus, totally opposed to this. Obama only got that through by 18 votes. I'm sorry, he got all the Republican votes, but 18 Democratic senators defected in 2015 when I was helping to lead the charge against it, because he was continuing to include investor-state dispute settlement, meaning forget about the jobs of Americans. We're going to encourage American corporations to invest in other countries, TPP, 13 Asian countries with horribly low wages, no worker rights. But even in Latin America, for the most part, no worker rights, very low wages, below poverty level wages. And you're encouraging them to do it because in this country, if we pass environmental or labor or other legislation, they have to live by it, but not in these other countries.
So basically multi-billion dollar corporate conglomerates are essentially holding all the power over foreign governments in their own country on how they can regulate, if they can regulate, because if they do regulate, they're going to get sued for profits that General Motors and other corporations lose.
Exactly, but even worse, not sued in the courts of that nation. No, we can't have that. No. They get sued in an international tribunal where the arbitrators are corporate lawyers. Jesus. Multinational corporate lawyers are the arbitrators of those cases. That is a disgrace. It's still not well enough publicized. Again, groups like Global Trade Watch, the AFL-CIO, dead on the money on this issue. And that's why, and Lighthizer, for lots of reasons, the current U.S. Trade Representative agreed with the premise that that must go. And it is not in the USMCA. So the notion that the Biden government, soon to be government, president-elect, does not single that out as a heinous example of destroying the lives of working class people in this country. If he doesn't deliver on that and doesn't realize that the current U.S. Trade Representative has done far better by working class people than the two trade reps that Obama appointed, Froman and Kirk, both from corporate America. And then if we get another nomination for a trade rep like Froman and Kirk, God help us all in terms of defending against fascism the next time.
Well, we've heard rumors. I mean, it's like ring around the rosy with Rahm Emanuel, transportation secretary, possibly trade rep. So who knows? But yeah, we've heard some suggestions that Biden's trade rep could be somebody like Emanuel from the corporate world.
That's exactly right. And we haven't heard, and we've also heard, as you said, as the premise for this conversation, we've also heard that, well, the other nations in the TPP formed their own agreement. Basically, the agreement that we rejected, and was only rejected in the aftermath of the 2016 election, sadly, I might add, and that the U.S., again, we're hearing the same thing. Foreign policy must trump jobs and economic and trade policy. We're hearing exactly this from Biden allies, the insiders, who will make up the new State Department, the ring right around him, that we need to look at rejoining. Now, some of them have said it needs to be changed, but none of them have said that we need to eliminate the very core incentives that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce fights for and lost on, ironically, with Trump, this one thing, huge thing. None of them have clearly said that we cannot do another trade deal or join the TPP nations. No, instead they've said, well, if we're serious about fighting China, we need to join with those nations, without saying anything about American jobs. Same mistake Obama made. Obama said manufacturing's dead. He never said it that way. But the future's about service sector and technology. He went to Nike's headquarters in Beaverton, Oregon, to announce the arrival of the final TPP to go to the U.S. Congress, a place where not a single manufacturing job is in this country. It's all headquarters jobs. And as I and others said to him with due love and reverence, for other reasons, not trade, at that time, President Obama, working class people, we don't get the headquarters jobs unless it's cleaning the floors. That's irreverent, going to Nike's headquarters to announce this deal. Sure, Nike wants the deal. They make all their shoes in Asia.
Well, let me ask you, so my viewers can understand, What is their argument? I'm trying to understand that argument of this protects us. It's about defense. Joining these other Pacific nations in TPP is a national security issue. It protects us against China. I don't know. Dumb it down for me. How does creating jobs in other Pacific countries and taking jobs away from America protect us?
So since World War II, our foreign policy has been largely based on making alliances in what I call practical, not a pragmatic way, with governments as they exist, wherever we can find them. And so what the president said to me directly,
Obama,
in his office, was this is about pulling Vietnam, that means their government, not the people, from China to our orbit. Same premise that we're hearing right now from the foreign policy crew, as so far announced. They're not all announced. We could hope for some better appointments. We better get a good appointment for USDR. It's not going to go backwards on this point. But the premise would be that the national security is served by pulling those governments as they stand. They don't need to do workers' rights. As they stand to our orbit from China. And I would add to that instead of, so what does China do foreign policy-wise? They go to developing economies all over the world. They build hospitals, roads, sports stadiums. And what do? We make trade deals like these that ruin American manufacturing jobs, and we sell at cheap prices armaments or give them away. Again, we side with the present government to defend that government, whether it's Saudi Arabia or anybody else, not with the people. And we sell out American working class jobs, manufacturing jobs. We're never going to have an economy. No country in the world believes, nor do the economists that any of us would listen to in this country, that you can have a successful economy without manufacturing. Even if it's quote, high value manufacturing, you must have manufacturing. And that should be a lesson from the decline of the British Empire, let alone the decline of this empire.
Well, I mean, to me, it seems like the United States' main economic policy is making sure China doesn't overtake it as the world's economic power. And to do that, they think they need to line up these other countries like ducks in a row in alliances with the United States. But they're forgetting that in doing that, they're actually destroying the core of the American economy, which is manufacturing, which I never believed can't come back. Of course, you could be manufacturing at high levels, renewable energy, wind, solar, you name it. Am I getting that right? That basically...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. And let's just be clear here. We're not talking about a return to the time before, I was born into an industrial neighborhood in North Philadelphia when 30% of the U.S. economy was manufacturing or higher. No, we're saying that at 15%, that would be the balance we're talking about. 15% of the economy. We're not talking about the majority of the economy being manufacturing. But what do we learn from the COVID? We don't make even the pharmaceuticals here, only the R&D. And we don't make the masks. At the beginning of COVID, we didn't make the ventilators. So even from a national security point of view, there's a cogent argument that if you are out of balance on this question, if you leave it all to the short-term profits, it's Milton Friedman economics. The corporations are only here for their short-term profits. That props up the CEO and it props up the share price. It's not even longer-term profits. If we continue to operate on that basis, literally, God help us, and fascism will come back in the next election.
Well, to your point, right now, nurses are striking in New York, New Rochelle, because they're using the same masks over and over for weeks. They don't have the proper PPP during a deadly pandemic. I mean, we had over 3,000 deaths yesterday, a record. So that goes to your point that why is it that we don't have enough manufacturing capacity or a stockpile to begin with of mass protective gear?
Yeah, and again, you said it perfectly. Couldn't agree more.
And I wanted to ask you, because I think looking back at Obama would be instructive to kind of foreshadowing what Biden might do. Obama's doing his little book tour now. But you mentioned, union folks like you tried to persuade Obama against TPP, explaining that, you're decimating your industrial heartland. Did Obama or his people respond to that? Did it seem like they got it, or they just kind of ignored it?
No, they didn't ignore it. They disagreed. And that's the real danger here. They believe that our national security trumps everything else. So, okay, you could say that that might be true. But then they define that national security in terms of winning over current governments, whether good or bad, with Saudi Arabia obviously being the worst case, but whether good or bad, not a fundamental definition of foreign policy based on worker rights and human rights globally. But secondly, in this practicalist way, saying we'll trade off American jobs for the adherence of those governments like Vietnam. People would say on the surface, well, it's Communist Party government, Vietnam and China. Yeah, they have a nationalist hatred that goes back, I don't know how long, decades, if not centuries, of oppression. And so they're basically feeding off of that. And Vietnam is the centerpiece and was the centerpiece for Obama of the TPP. It's a huge country. We don't realize it here. I knew that. I forget now the exact population, but it's at least 100 million. It's not a small country. And also for U.S. multinationals, it's a place where they can move manufacturing at a much cheaper wage than China. They don't want to pay. China, to their credit, has been raising wages in manufacturing. Manufacturing wages in places like Mexico, Bangladesh, Vietnam are way less than half of what they are in China. So again, let's go back to the definition that corporate America still uses, with some exceptions, I might say, but still uses. What are our profits for the next quarter? What is our expectation for the next year? That's what drives the share price. And as Jack Welch said, he was brazen enough to admit it. If I could put every GE CEO at the time, General Electric CEO, if I could put every GE manufacturing plant on a barge and move it to the lowest wage country, that's what I'd do. And then when the wages went up, I'd move it again.
Hope you enjoyed that last video. Hop on over to statuscoup.com where you can sign up for our email list and become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Membership is how we grow. That's statuscoup.com/join. And remember, join our email list so we can grow the revolution with you.